will tell you stories from a long, long time ago, or many, many stories. So I actually wrote it down because I wanted to make sure that you heard a message, and that message is something that only you can really figure out. So I was born in Longjing, Laos, but grew up in St. Paul, Minnesota. I am a native Hmong Linh, but married into a Hmong Dao family. So I'll be speaking in English, some Hmong Dao, and Hmong Linh. I hope I don't confuse you. So those of you who only speak English, I hope I don't confuse when I do speak Hmong. Because sometimes I do switch between all three, and that's okay. Many times I would sit between my mom, right here, and my mother-in-law, and in a room full of people, I would turn my head and speak to my mom in Hmong Linh, and then turn to my mother-in-law and speak to her in Hmong Dao. And then I would talk to the rest of the people in the room in English. And so tonight is just like one of those times. So I hope that if we are switching between Hmong Linh and Hmong Dao in English, that you'll catch at least some of it. When I was in college, I felt I knew exactly what I wanted to do. You saw up there that I was a double major in psychology and criminal justice. I loved psychology and I loved criminal justice. The difference now is I'm not in psychology or criminal justice, but I did marry a probation officer, so he close enough. My only issue was trying to explain in Hmong to my parents at that time what I was studying. I didn't have enough Hmong to do this, so I used to say, psychology, ya, go to Tone Jupu. Laya, go Baku Tone Lulu. And then I thought, okay, I just said psychology is learning about people's behaviors and helping to fix people's brains? That didn't sound right. So I hope it didn't sound like I was going to be a brain surgeon. I wasn't. A grandma once asked me, I didn't know how to explain what a psychologist does to fix people's brains, so I said, basic. Yep, just talk to them, is what I told this grandma. Pair that up with criminal justice, and I wanted to go into criminal psychology. Criminal psychology, criminal psychology, I wasn't sure how to explain that I wanted to help people in prison to my parents. So I really, at that point then I decided I really don't know what exactly I wanted to do after all. I had friends who were studying education at the time I was in college, and I used to say to them, wow, I don't know how you do it. But then I took a job in China teaching English at Jilin University. My students were college freshmen and sophomore English majors. I was given a book about as thick as 2 fingers, like that thick, and was told I should read 1 story each day. And my students would just all sit quietly, kind of like what you're doing now, and they would just listen to me. Well, I thought, well, if teaching is like that, that's easy. So on my first day of teaching, I didn't know what to do. I wasn't an education major. I hadn't ever taught before. But I knew that I had to do what I was told. So I knew I should have asked for some tips from an English major, but I didn't. Or for an education major, and I didn't before I started teaching. So all the students were facing me. They were seated in rows facing me. And if you can picture classrooms in China, every student, they're in straight rows and they're all facing, looking at me. And I actually stood behind a podium on a platform, because their teachers were on platforms, and behind a podium, and you put your book on the podium, and you really, really did just read to them the whole time. And you really didn't move from your podium. So I stood there, and yep, they were quiet. Nobody said a word to me. And yep, they were ready to listen. They all looked like they were ready to listen. And yet, I had a book in front of me. I held the book there on the podium, just like what I was told I should do. And they all just watched me. And yep, then I started to read from that book. Lesson 1, I started. And I continued reading, and I kept on reading, and I only glanced up a few times. Every time I glanced up at the students, though, they smiled at me. And even though they were smiling at me, I knew it was boring. I thought, this is boring. If this is teaching, this is boring. And if they think they're learning, this is boring, is what I kept thinking as I was reading this. So I stopped in the middle of the story. I just looked at them and I thought, this can't be it. This cannot be teaching.
Hello.
So I walked off the platform and I stood and I went over and I stood right next to the first student in the front seat. And they all started to whisper in Chinese at that moment because it was not what they were used to. And I was doing something that was a surprise to them and they weren't prepared for it. And then I asked, what did I just read about? Well, their eyes got bigger and the smiles kind of stopped and they turned into kind of more looks like, what? Like now I wanted them to talk. And they were surprised by that. But what I discovered though is that from that point on, I discovered a new passion. I discovered that there was something to be discovered here. And it wasn't that I was coming with the expertise of, here, I know how to teach and I'm going to teach you. There was something in that room, and it was in every single one of the students that I needed to help them figure out. So the rest of the school year did go really well. I didn't follow any of the curriculum. I didn't read from the book ever. Every time my boss asked me, how's it going? What story are you on? I just said, oh, it's good. It's good. But I didn't read from it at all. I really did go off the curriculum. I decided these were all freshman and sophomore English majors. They're a lot smarter than what this book that they gave me is supposed to do. So I decided I'm not going to use the curriculum. I'm going to create a new curriculum. So that's what I did when I was there. I ended up changing the whole curriculum. I changed the way that we were teaching. I did not teach like the other Chinese college professors. I did not stand on the podium. I did not stand on the stage. Instead, I talked to the students and I said to them, listen, you don't need to listen to me read to you in English. You need to use the English that you already know. So the rest of the year became